So he does this shaman thing. And one of the ways that he heals is he lights a candle and holds it out in front of him. And then he kamais. And kamai means you take this very high octane alcohol in your mouth and you blow it out in a spray. Blows it into the candle and it forms a cloud of fire. It's this light blue cloud of fire. And as you reach in to the fire and rub yourself with the fire, I am retiring from being a psychotherapist because I'm really being pulled into the shamanic and the magic world. I mean, it's there. It says, okay, it's time to do this kind of work more. And so I'm shutting down that part because in our culture, they don't integrate.
Yeah.
So I'm shutting this one down and opening this other one up.
We've both been obsessed with Greece since we were young. So what's your story?
I was a teenager and I lived in a town that had a harbor. All right. And my boyfriend had met some Greek sailors and they invited us to the boat for dinner. All right.
Yes.
And so that's where I learned to say "efficasto." I say that perfectly. And we had dinner and I was just charmed. For some reason, I was just charmed, you know. But I was like, what, 17, 18. Years go by, few years. And I was living in Houston and there was a harbor area. And they had a Greek restaurant, really Greek. It was for the sailors. And we would go and we would have Greek food and we would dance the Greek dances.
Oh my God.
You know, and all of that. And so all this time, you know, I wanted to go to Greece, but the opportunity never came up. And then I had a very unusual situation relating to Greece. I was, you know, at one of the local Greek festivals that they have in town. I was at the Greek festival. I was by myself. I was having a good time. You know, I'd gotten some food. I'm sitting there and they're playing Greek music. And they start playing this one particular song. I don't even know the name of it. I'm sitting there and all of a sudden this immense pathos just rises up in me and I start sobbing.
What do you mean by pathos? What's pathos?
Pathos is like sadness, nostalgia, regret, all rolled into one.
Wow.
Just flowed up inside of me and I started sobbing. I mean, really sobbing. And I don't usually cry easily, you know. I'm crying. And I said, what is this? So, I calmed myself down and I went inside and I tried to look at images that came forward that were connected to this feeling. And the image was I was a young man. I was coming home from somewhere. I was walking up over the hill. And when I got to the top of the hill and looked at my village, it had been decimated. It had been destroyed, burned, everything. And the feelings were attached.
Wow.
To that. So I know somewhere in me, because I love the Greek music, the Greek food, you know, somewhere in me is the connection to that time, that era, even though I can't explain it.
And sometimes I wonder, with past lives, is it our ancestral lineage, like directly that you had some Greek ancestor, or is it past lives that are not connected to the physical body that we're tuning into? I've always kind of wondered about that.
I don't think it's connected to, I honestly feel like, all right, I feel like, and I have to use the terms I and we and me, but I don't mean that. Because I, we, me is really an energetic, it's like a current. And it's us, but it's us without a formal identity.
Mm-hmm.
It's
The
a,
current of consciousness.
like, a current has an identity, but it doesn't have a name. It's a current
Mm-hmm.
like that.
Mm-hmm. It's not separate from the water. It's the water, but it's also a force
Right.
within the water.
And it flows through different incarnations
Uh-huh.
and different, and in that respect, I think it carries genetically, but it isn't it. It just is inhabiting
Mhm.
the DNA constellation of that lineage. But it's hard to describe. It's not the lineage exactly, but it's in the inhabiting of the lineage. Because I had one other really deep experience. I don't think it's connected to Greece, but I was at Burning Man at our camp. It was in the morning, you know, after breakfast, and I'm talking to a woman there. Her name's Eva. And we're just having a regular conversation, about the morning.
Mhm.
And I fell through time.
Mm.
I fell through time. I mean, I still could see everything out here. All right, but I fell through time. And all of a sudden, I was a young man. I'd say I was about 20. And I'm talking to this girl, which at that in the now time was Eva, but it wasn't Eva.
Mm-hmm.
And so I fall through time. I'm looking at the girl and I say to her, I told you I would never forget you. Right from my heart. I said this.
Mm.
My regular conscious mind is over here. Look at what the hell, but I'm really in that time. And I said to her, I told you I would never forget you,
Mm.
but I'm a traveler.
Mm.
And at that, she got angry. The girl in the past got really, I mean, like, you know, back into this time.
Uh-huh.
And she was so angry that I couldn't even converse.
Uh-huh.
She got stuck there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I had to back away. She was very angry. She was so upset they had to do a spirit canoe on her.
So is this like was Eva upset in this
Yeah,
time?
Eva in that time was upset, but it's coming through
Yes.
Eva present time.
And what's a spirit canoe?
Spirit canoe is when you go and you look for lost parts
Okay.
of a person. It's kind of like a soul retrieval, but it's more intense because
Okay.
it's a group. You have three people on each side as symbolic rowers.
Okay.
You have someone at the helm who is seeing, and another person kind of like guiding the boat.
Wow.
And they had to do a spirit canoe on her. I don't know what they found or what they did, but
Uh,
she settled down and
yeah.
finally speak again. But it was clearly falling through time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
There was
Whew.
no question that I had flipped back. And again, see, I have to use I,
Yeah.
but it wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how amazing that you were able to both of you connect to that time and bring it into this time to process.
Right. But there was no intention. We weren't
Yeah,
tr-
yeah.
we weren't trying to do anything. It just
Yeah.
happened like that.
But you were capable of doing that because you have your shamanic background and you're with other people who are willing to do a spirit canoe and ready.
Right, right,
Like
right.
that's amazing. And so is this a shaman camp
Yeah.
in
We call it Shamandome. Yeah.
Shamandome? Okay. Okay. There's so many things I want to talk about. We're gonna have to do a million of these. We started with Greece because I'm in the process of moving to Greece. I've wanted to move to Greece, or not. I've wanted to go to Greece since I was 20 years old. I was living in Italy, and I was doing study abroad. and my group of girlfriends were all going to fly to Greece for spring break. And I wanted to go so bad, and I couldn't afford the flight. And so instead, my best friend who we met there, maybe we weren't best friends yet. I think we just met a week or two before. But instead, she was taking the train down the coast of Italy to meet her family that she never met before, her Italian family. And so she's like, well, do you want to, since you can't fly to Greece, do you want to come with me? Which is much cheaper to take the train. And I was like, yes, that'd be awesome. And it was the most amazing trip because we were staying with her Italian family, and they all like Italians freak out if family comes to visit. And they didn't care that I wasn't blood. Like they treated me like they treated her, like they treat us like queens. They
Okay.
made us like sleep in their beds. Her 6-year-old aunt and uncle were like, we'll sleep on the couch. They stuffed us with food. I gained 10 pounds in 1 week because I I was like, when they were like, manja, manja. And like my friend would say no. She'd be like, no, I'm full. But I was codependent. And so if they wanted me to eat, I'd be like, okay, I'll eat whatever you want me to eat. I don't want you to feel sad. So I ate a lot. My Italian boyfriend was not happy when I came back a week later, 10 pounds heavier.
Ooh, it's
But so I
funny.
had, and I've lived in Italy a few times, and I've just never made it to Greece. And I've always been like, how has it been 24 years and I've never made it? And so earlier this year I had this kind of awakening, and I was told, get rid of all your shit, get your finances in order, you're moving. And I was like, oh, where are we going?
Oh,
And at
wow.
first I thought it was Hawaii, but then it redirected to Greece, which I was like, well, if I could pick anywhere to go in the world, it would be Greece. So let's just go with that. And so I moved out of my house. We're selling everything. I'm currently selling my car. The car is funding the tickets and the passports, and I have my 2 daughters.
Oh, that's
So
so big.
it's
Well,
big. It is. It's big.
it's huge. It's
Yeah.
huge.
And I feel like I never went to Greece because I wasn't as aware as I am now of the whole priestess lineage and the goddesses and like all of the rich history of the divine feminine that
Yeah,
Greece holds, that's
yeah.
been repressed and destroyed over the last 2000 years. And we actually met through a mutual friend, Eric, who lived in Greece for a while.
Okay.
And he's like an expert on Greek history, and I love having him as a resource. So you might want to talk to Eric too about your trip to Greece in November.
He's been there, huh?
He lived there for a couple years, and he
Okay.
got really,
Yay. All
and
right.
he knows
Yep.
all the best.
Mhm.
So let's backtrack to how. So you're a psychotherapist
Yeah.
and
Psychology.
a shaman, correct?
We never call ourselves a shaman ourselves.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
only by designation or other people. So I do shamanic work.
You do shamanic work. Okay. How did that start? How did you get into shamanic work?
Well, it's interesting. I didn't get into shamanic work because I said I wanted to be a shaman.
Yeah.
No, what I later learned was nothing less than a shamanic initiation. And I'll try to just really briefly go through it because it happened over like 4 months, so it's not quick. But one day, I think it was in April, I'm driving in the car in Texas, fine day, nothing's going on, nothing really in my mind, and this really awful, horrible, horrible feeling just fell into me. Just all of a sudden, it was totally a gross feeling. And I thought, what in the hell? Because it wasn't like being sick. It wasn't any of those kind of feelings. And I've always had the ability to turn around and look at my inner mind, what's going on in there. And I saw the me looking like I had been burned, no
Mm.
hair, thrown in a river and bloated. It
Oof.
was really, really, really a gross, gross thing. And it was so real that I touched my face because I'm driving, right? I'm driving the car. I'm touching my face, and my face felt like my face, but even at that, it wasn't reassuring.
Mm.
I had to look in the rearview mirror. Oh, my face is still here. I'm here.
Yes.
And so I just had to ride with that feeling. I couldn't tell anybody. No one would know.
Mhm.
And so the really awful part of it kind of diminished, but it was still there. And I went to various healers and various people, and it calmed down somewhat, but it was left with a residual of something like banishment, where that people would be talking to me and all of a sudden it'd be like I didn't exist. They'd just walk off, or they
Hmm.
stop in mid-sentence or whatever. And I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know what it was, any of that. So I want to fast forward. I had a trip planned even before this had happened to go to Ecuador and meet 4 shaman in a week or something. And so I went on this trip. The banishment was there, not the awful feeling, but the banishment feeling. And it was the last shaman that I knew was my shaman. And his diagnosis for me was envy. I'm standing there in this barn, essentially, and he's reading my candle. That's the way they diagnose. And he says, envy. And I thought, envy? Did I envy someone? Am I being punished?
Uh-huh.
No, he said, someone envied you 6 months ago. This is hard, but I think I can do it. So he does this shaman thing. And one of the ways that he heals is he lights a candle. I don't think it's the candle he used to diagnose.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. He lights a candle and holds it out in front of him. And then he kamais. And kamai means you take this very high octane alcohol in your mouth and you blow it out in a spray.
Uh-huh.
Blows it into the candle and it forms a cloud of fire. It's this light blue cloud of fire. And as you reach in to the fire and rub yourself with the fire. And so that's what I did. I wasn't feeling, I mean, you're almost in a little bit of shock when you're standing there with the shaman in the fire. So I didn't feel anything at that moment.
Uh-huh.
But the next morning, I knew that he had lifted the curse, because when I came downstairs on the prior days, no one noticed me. It was like the banishment thing.
Uh-huh.
Hardly anyone spoke to me or anything. I
Uh-huh.
came down the stairs and everybody said, "Oh, you look really good today. How are you?" And I said, "Oh, he fixed it."
Huh.
All right, so that was great. I go home, and then I don't want to go into it, but I got real world confirmation that 6 months prior,
Okay.
some did have evil intent. There was tangible evidence of evil intent. So I knew that part was true. All
Mhm.
right. Go forward another month or so, because I lose track.
And just so for context, were you living in Texas?
I was living here in St. Louis, everything
Nice.
outside world completely normal.
And you were working as a
Yeah,
psychotherapist?
yep, yep,
Okay.
all that. Anyway, I woke up one night, I was awoken one night by a housemate saying, get up, there's smoke, get up." And I got up and went down. My whole hallway and everything was full of smoke. I couldn't see. I didn't have all my contact. I was trying to dial. I couldn't see. The smoke was getting deeper. My study was blazing with fire. And I realized that I had to get out of the house. I ran out of the house. I got burned
Oof.
a little bit anyway. And I run out of the house and I'm sitting on the lawn, 3 o'clock in the morning. My house is in flames. My pets are in there too,
Oof.
but I would have died.
Yeah.
And I'm calm.
Mm.
Sitting there, I'm calm. I knew this was, I guess I've always been sort of spiritual. I knew this was a cleansing. It was like somebody had come along and just wiped away my past. I'm sitting there.
Yeah.
So I go to the hospital. The insurance company gives you a place to live. They're rebuilding my house.
So you lost like everything burned in the house and
Everything,
your
every
pets burned?
yes,
Oh.
everything. 3 pets.
And then
Three,
like all your books, all your clothes, all your
everything,
things.
everything gone, gone.
Whew.
So I go to the hospital, and this really is gonna lead to how I got to shamanism.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. So this you go through this, yeah,
I
clearing
go to
death
I go to
portal.
the hospital, I get fixed up. I'm staying in a apartment that, the insurance people provide me.
Yeah.
And one night I was listening to music with a friend. We're laying on the floor, we're listening to music, everything's relaxed. And I start feeling this energy coming around me. It was serpentine in its movements. It wasn't a snake, but it was,
Mhm.
like that kind of movement.
Mhm.
And it felt very powerful, very gentle, but very powerful. I didn't know, what is this? And then it went away. But a couple of nights, again, the same kind of circumstance. Here, this energy is coming around me again. And I call it my inner teacher.
Mhm.
What is this? What? And the only response I got was, it's asking for permission.
Mm.
It's asking for an invitation. And so I sort of energetically reach over there. It felt good. It felt powerful. It felt right. And I
Mhm.
said, yes. I said, yes. And my whole life changed
Mm.
when I said yes. Because after that, I was filled with, I don't know what kind of energy you call it, tantric energy, spiritual
Mhm.
energy. I was glowing.
Mhm.
Literally, you could see I was glowing. I could touch people and they would feel my touch,
Mm.
feel good. People would come up to me out of the blue. We would look into each other's eyes and we would embrace, and you'd feel some kind of transmission going on.
Mhm.
And then they go on their way. This was happening over and over again. People would come into my presence and tell someone else, oh, she's my teacher.
Mhm.
And my regular mind would say, what the hell? But my other part of me would go, like I
Mhm.
knew. It
Mhm.
went on for years and years.
And how long ago was this?
This was a long time ago. This was in 96.
Okay, 96.
And the strength of it went on for many years. Yeah, I mean, still present, but
Mhm. Mhm.
not to the intensity. But it was so strong and it was so different. I didn't want people to be afraid of it
Mhm.
because it was strange.
Mhm.
And I also wanted to, I knew that it had something to do with spirit work.
Mhm.
I've been spiritual all my life. So I'd read books on shamanism. I'd read books on this and this. And so I knew that I was operating in that domain.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay. But I didn't know, I didn't have a name for it. And I didn't want people to, you know, to be apprehensive
Mhm.
because it would happen no matter. I
Mhm.
wasn't making it happen. They weren't making it happen, but it would happen. And that's when I decided to honor all the traditions that I could, all the methods that I could.
Mhm.
So that's when I took the 3-year shamanic
Mhm.
so that I could have a form that this could be operating in. I became a Reiki master. I did healing touch. I did hypnosis, meditation, just
Mhm.
I was making a home for this energy
Mhm.
then.
And I've had this, not the same experience, but a similar experience just recently though, and mine was in February when kind of like these healing powers activated and all these things activated. And I've always been spiritual and I've always been obsessed with anything supernatural, the occult, like from when I was a little kid. And I feel like I've always kind of doubted, like, is this really real? Are we making this up in our minds? And it wasn't until February that I had this experiential gnosis
All right.
of the energies of these things being real. beyond just coincidence, synchronicity. And I feel like for me it's been a two-part thing of things coming through me intuitively, like I'm being told to do certain healings on people and I don't know what I'm doing. I never did Reiki training. And so
Yeah,
I'm just kind of doing what I'm guided, that's kind of coming out of me.
exactly.
And
The same for me. Exactly.
and I feel like it's helpful to also learn from different methodologies and ways of teaching that resonate, because it's helpful to have different contexts and teachings and a framework for what may be arising naturally.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And I knew about shamanism. This is funny, but I knew about shamanism because when I was getting my PhD, I read a book by Michael Horner, The Way of the Shaman. And in reading that, I was actually reading it about brainwave entrainment and things like
Mhm.
that in meditation. And he had a whole section on shamanism,
Mhm.
which, it intrigued me. I didn't follow it, but I knew about it.
Mhm.
So with this happening, and then serendipitously, after I had taken the 3 year and I already had this experience, I I found a home to do the shamanic work when I met a woman in New York who was beginning the Shamandome camp at Burning Man.
And what
So,
year was this?
oh God, that was 16 years ago, 17 years. I mean, I've gone to Burning Man every year for at least 16 years because I could do my shamanic healing there.
Mm.
That's really, I mean, I love all the other stuff, but I really went because I could really allow that to flourish and no questions asked.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
people would tell me that not always, but a lot of times it would be life changing. And I found out in doing shamanic work and shamanic training that there is a realm that we know more, way, way, way more than we think we know. And it's just a matter of knowing how to access that realm and to trust it.
Mhm.
You can't think. It's
Mhm.
very confusing for people when I say the worst thing you can do is try to think about it.
Absolutely. And it's also I feel like it arises out of the body, and we need to learn how to listen to our body and let our body and the energy move us.
Mhm.
Because part of, in my experience, part of shamanism is doing these weird things that your body's just feels like doing, or the energy is having you do, that are
Right.
not logical or rational or look weird and don't make any sense. You don't know why, but the energy is calling for this
Yes,
expression.
right.
And if you allow yourself to be a conduit for the energy and express it, then you can change the energy and shift the energy on behalf of another person if
Mhm.
they're willing to receive. And I think we're all shamans essentially, because I feel like shamanism is just working with energy. And like any human who's alive, on even if it's even if it's a completely disconnected unconscious level, doing this, you're working with energy. And so I
Sure.
think innately, and again, not that all humans have access to it, but I feel like innately we are all shamans and we can all learn to tune into that energy that arises from within, with which we can heal each other and
Mhm.
ourselves.
Well, at Burning Man, we call ourselves shamanistas,
Uh-huh.
okay, because we're not following a particular lineage or a particular
Okay.
line. And some people feel the energy as you do.
Uh-huh.
I usually see it by basically going inside and seeing and guiding. And sometime with energy and stuff, it's hard to describe, but it's like
Yeah.
you're in a different dimension for that person.
Uh-huh.
And so that's the way I do it. But different people have different ways, but it is like you say, it's an inner guidance. However you're doing it, it's an inner guidance. And it's
Mm-hmm.
for the service of another,
Mm-hmm.
healing of another. Mm.
Yeah. And I feel like more and more it's arising in our culture, because I don't know, when I didn't hear about shamanism and shamans until probably like 2000, in the 2000s. I think was when I first started to be exposed to it. And I began to attend some shamanic meditations in 2013. And again, like I was interested in it, but it wasn't something I pursued. And I never really considered, I was never like, I want to be a healer or I want to do this stuff. Like I was just fascinated by it.
Me either. I never, I mean, that wasn't my goal in life.
Yeah. And I feel like I'm being called and led and guided, and these things are happening that I'm not again, like I didn't get certified in Reiki so I could do healing, but I feel like these things are being called, and I'm seeing more of that come online for people now because I feel like it's time, you know.
I, no, I totally agree. And it's interesting that we're talking about shamanism because last night, or when I was waking up this morning, I just had a dream.
Mhm.
And the first dream I've ever had where I was doing shamanic work in a dream.
Mm.
And I was in Poland and I was with a group of people and we
In
were
Poland?
in Poland for some reason.
Okay.
My dreams are very vivid, but I was telling them about this. And at one point I was working on a woman and blowing, you blow energy.
Uh-huh.
And my guy Alan was over there working with another guy. And then I was telling them we're gonna have dinner and then I'm gonna show you how to journey. And that was but I've never had a shaman of such a clear shaman dream, you know.
And I wonder if you were connecting with somebody or people in Poland that are now like you're like their inner teacher coming through dream time to teach them how to do some kind of shamanic practices.
I could be. I don't know, I'm just right now, like you're going to Greece, I'm practicing saying yes,
Mhm.
and I have no idea what I'm saying yes to.
Yeah, no, that's
I,
me.
I
When
feel
it's
I feel an energy. I feel an energy, something like wanting to be born. I have no idea what that means, and I'm just saying yes. I'm here, you know.
yes, and that's what when I met you online through a community that I started called Practical Mystics. It was a writing group, and my friend Eric shared it with you, I think, and then you're like, "Yes, I want this. I need this. Like, I want to be there."
Okay.
And the thing that struck me the most about you is I feel like in our culture, we don't have very many elders who are tuned in to wisdom or their own wisdom. And a lot of our elders, literally in our culture, have dementia and are not even functioning in consciousness, and it's sure they're ill or they're sick. They're
Uh-huh.
not they're not functioning at like a very high level because of the systems of oppression that's created, I believe, purposefully to dull out the wisdom of elders so that the population is more easily controlled. But I love how open you are. And a lot of, again, in my experience, a lot of elders in Western society begin to calcify and close as they age.
Uh-huh.
And what I see in you is the opposite. Like you go to Burning Man and you're open and you're curious and you're excited about life. And so I love you as an example of staying open and continuing to stay open.
Well, that's because my spacesuit for planet Earth is wearing down. I'm not.
Mhm, mhm.
That's a difference.
Yeah, yeah, and I love that. It's such a beautiful reminder, and again, I feel like in our culture, a lot of us are told, "Oh, well, if you haven't done something by the age of 30, it's too late. You're too old." No, no, like there are all these stories and programs that we're given.
Crazy idea, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's insane, and it holds so many people back from moving to Greece or from starting to learn the piano or from taking a course in shamanism.
Mhm.
They'll be like, "Oh, it's too late for me. I'm too old. I had to have started when I was young." And it's such a lie.
Well, what I call it, this shamanic initiation happened when I think I was 51. And my life totally changed
Mhm.
in an absolutely beautiful way. I have never been told I'm adorable, I'm beautiful,
Mhm.
as many times as I've been told since this thing happened. Literally all the time, all the time.
Yeah.
Isn't that great?
Yes.
It's
And that's also the reminder that it's not about like keeping your skin looking a certain way or like being a certain weight. It's about the energy. Like beauty comes from that energy of being alive. and being
It's
connected to your soul and your heart. And like, yes, like maybe there's other ways that beauty expresses that can be, manipulated with plastic surgery. And like what really matters is that energy and that connection to
no,
love.
I agree. I mean, I have met people who physically are very beautiful.
Mhm.
You know, wow.
Yeah.
But if you get to know them and they don't have any inner beauty, it's really
Hmm.
interesting. Their outer beauty just begins to dull. I mean, it's like it almost becomes two-dimensional,
Yes.
you know.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that on the other hand, people who are not beautiful, they're homely, I guess, but they
Mhm.
have this inner glow or something. After a while, you see their beauty, you don't see their outer form.
Yeah.
It can go, it's like you're talking, you can go either way.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I think that's a very important reminder. Like I've spent most of my life feeling ugly. Like
Really?
yeah,
Oh,
and it's still something I've worked on it. And Burning Man specifically in 2013, I remember I was at the burn and I became friends with this like gorgeous man, Dominic, gay guy, like tall, dark and handsome, Italian, blue eyes, like one of the most beautiful men I've ever met in real life. And I've told him this a bunch of times.
yeah.
And at that burn, I did some really deep work about my belief in beauty and just that feeling of being ugly. And for me it was centered around like my nose was too wide,
Okay.
because like my
Okay.
mother's nose was super thin, and as a white woman growing up in Orange County in the 80s and 90s, I was taught to be gorgeous you need to have a super thin nose and you need to be skinny.
Really?
And yeah, and again, like this, in my family, my cousin had a very tiny nose and very petite, and I was, kind of bigger. And somebody in my family said to me when I was like 8 years old, "Your cousin is like a classic beauty because blah blah blah, and you're more of an unconventional beauty." And that was a wounding point for me. And so,
Oh,
and I was kind of a late bloomer. So yeah, so just there's so much conditioning, density, heaviness, all of these lies that we're taught that then we take on that keep us constricted and trapped. Because part of mine was like, oh, I'm not hot enough. Like I see a guy's attractive. I like he's too attractive for me. Like I'm not hot enough. So I won't even like make eye contact or anything.
yeah, yeah.
And yeah. So I don't know. Went off on a tangent.
No, no. I mean, that plagues a lot of girls.
Hmm.
But if I notice social changes, I mean, just, what's being advertised, what's on the billboards, what people are wearing, that kind of stuff. Because I understand that they're representative of something else coming up and showing itself. And if you go out and around now and you look around, it's totally different. Women for the last 5 years, it's kind of out of fashion right now. We're wearing tights, no
Hmm.
matter their body shape, no matter their body shape. Pregnant women no longer wore maternity. They were out there with their bellies. People, the only thing I mourned is that people weren't dressing up with color. And I love,
I love color too.
clothes and all that, because most people were wearing like stuff from Old Navy, but what I saw bubbling up from that is an acceptance of their bodies that wasn't there even, I'd say I'd have to go back 15 years to really say when the shift started.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, but if you just are aware of what you see around you, when I was in New York recently, just a couple of weeks ago, I noticed that none of the women were wearing any kind of makeup. It didn't
Wow.
matter. It didn't matter what their age. They could be young or they could be
Yeah.
old. No one was wearing makeup.
Yeah.
They were just themselves.
Yeah.
I thought, wow, that is a big change.
Yeah. That's
What's a
powerful.
cosmetic industry gonna do when people say, I don't care? I,
Yeah.
I am who I am. But really, no one wore any makeup. Every once in 100 or more people, you might see someone maybe with eyeliner or, they did something to their hair.
Hmm. And I love that freedom, the freedom to, because I went through a period of maybe 10 years where I didn't wear any makeup. But it was like an exercise in me, like, can I still feel, mildly attractive, or still, can I feel okay without the makeup?
Right.
And I did that experience for a while to just try to work through the insecurities. And then eventually I was like, okay, like, I've done that. And I like how I look with mascara on, because my eyelashes are blonde. So if I don't have mascara on, you can't see my eyelashes at all. And I
Okay.
like, so I have like a little tiny bit of makeup that I enjoy, that feels good to me to wear. And I know that I'm also okay without it. And so it's been a beautiful journey of, yeah, liberating myself from back when I was maybe in my 20s, where I couldn't leave the house without my mascara on.
If you didn't look that way, you didn't want anyone to see you. Don't see.
Mhm.
You.
Yeah. Yeah. And going back to the body positivity and like releasing the body shaming, and people just being like, this is how I look and I'm going to be like this. And if you don't like it, that's not my problem. That's so liberating.
Exactly.
And I see that movement towards, if we break all of the boxes, what do you want to be? What do you want to express? What do you want to look like? What gender do you want to be? Which I have mixed feelings about that, because I feel like that's also being manipulated for profit in some ways. And I've talked with some trans friends, and they're like, it's about $1 million to go full from one gender to another. And it's
Uh,
big business. And so they are like, it is being a little bit commodified, weaponized. And it doesn't always, I mean, it's not, changing your externals isn't going to get you the internal change that you want. So if you're doing it for that reason, it's not going to work. If you're internally changing, you're internally matching your externals, then like that you can find some peace. And it's
well,
an interesting topic.
that's
But
always been the case, even with plastic surgery.
Mhm. Mm,
I mean, because this is as a psychologist, this is a phenomenon. You work with people with body dysmorphia and
yeah.
whatever, and they'll like you said have the wrong nose or this, and they'll go get it changed, but they haven't changed inside, and they still feel ugly,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because it's not an inside, I mean, it's an inside thing, really, not an outside thing.
Mm-hmm.
They've just kind of like imprinted in their brains.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's been a real phenomenon, and even psychologists trying to work with people with body dysmorphia. I remember I was doing a group session with, I think it was adolescents,
Mm-hmm.
but this girl was saying she felt so ugly because she had this mole on her face, and she just was always trying to hide her face. And I mean, there were 14 of us in the room, and we said, what mole? I mean, because we're all looking at her now. She thinks she has a mole. We're all looking at her. And she says, it's here. It was minuscule. It was about as big as a mosquito bite.
Yeah.
I mean, no one, but for her, it was like bloom, bloom, bloom. And then I had a guy as an individual client. Uh, his body dysmorphia was his brow. He felt like he had like a Neanderthal overhanging brow,
Mm.
which wasn't true. I mean, he had a brow, but it wasn't like, ugh. And so he would be dating someone, if they'd be looking at his face, which
Mm.
you want to look at someone, he would feel like, oh, they're fixated on his brow, and
Yeah.
so yeah, that it's an inside thing more than an outside thing. It
And we
really is.
have the power to make ourselves so miserable and neurotic and just unhappy, or we have the power to put ourselves in states of bliss and ecstasy and peace and joy.
Mhm.
The mind is so powerful.
Well, and you talk about, like the pharmaceuticals and the makeup companies and all of
Yeah.
that, they don't want to advertise that
No.
because they can't sell it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they keep on, now it's the eyebrows, or now it's this, or now it's that, because they can sell it.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I'm like you, I like to wear makeup and I like to wear colors. And I frankly don't care what other people think,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
like,
And that's the freedom.
like
Yes.
my
I love
blue,
your blue hair.
actually, I wear my blue hair because I did it for a festival and that was in February. I have gotten so many compliments on it that I said, oh, why not? Why not do it again?
Well, and again, I feel like there's this joke about old women with blue hair because I guess sometimes there's something that they apply to blue hair or to white hair to some
No,
process. And then,
my grandmother had blue hair.
okay.
It wasn't a very pretty color,
Yeah.
but if she didn't have blue hair, she'd have kind of this dingy yellow hair. I could
Yeah.
I could understand why she would do that. Yeah.
But I love that you're like flipping it and like claiming that because you love blue and you love the vibrancy and you love the color.
Well, if you notice, I did it because if you look out in the world, a lot of 40-year-old women from the suburbs have magenta hair,
Huh?
or somebody else has like multicolor hair. There's no longer a stigma
Uh,
against any color hair you want to have,
yeah.
or how many colors in your hair you want to have,
Yeah.
you know.
And going back to Burning Man too, that's I think that's the beauty of the culture that they created there is that it's like radical self-expression, radical acceptance, radical inclusion, where you get to express your true joy and your soul. And there's a container for that where you can do whatever you want pretty much with the, I mean, there are some guidelines of like harming others and having consent, but other than that, you're accepted and you're celebrated for whatever weirdness that you want to express.
Yeah, you could be talking to someone in some full out costume with fires popping from their head, or someone who's obese and hairy and completely naked, and you're just having a conversation.
Yeah.
Hey, no big deal.
Yeah. And I feel like that's the Aquarian shift that like moving into the age of Aquarius, I feel like the potentiality is this radical expression of the divinity of every separate different consciousness because we're all so different, but in our culture we've been taught, okay, like just kind of be the same as everyone else and tone it down or tone it up and you know be in that straight and narrow, and that's how you are accepted and loved and considered valuable and worthy. And now that's being dismantled.
It is. I mean, I go to festivals all the time, and in general, the vibe in festivals is like radical inclusion, radical self-expression, and a lot of love and generosity and joy.
Enjoy. Yeah.
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 So,
So do you want to talk a little bit about psychedelics or entheogens and your experience with various medicines?
yeah, whatever you want to pop up.
What's your journey with entheogens, medicine, psychedelics? Where did you start?
Before you were born.
Yes, I figured. That's why I asked.
Yeah, I think I smoked my first marijuana cigarette when I was 21,
Okay. Yeah.
and that the very first, I didn't feel anything. And then on the second try, I couldn't stop smiling,
Uh-huh.
you
And
know.
what around what time is this? What decade are we in?
That would have been that would have been around 1965.
Okay.
Mhm. Right after the Beatles came along. People kind of disparage what recreational or but that's all there was then.
Mhm.
If there were medical studies or any kind of research studies, no one heard about them.
Mhm. But I
You
think
know,
people were unintentionally or unconsciously using them for healing, for opening, for relaxing in the body after so much, from like the constriction and the repression of like probably the 40s and the
right.
50s, where it's like got really tight.
Well, it wasn't until like really about 10 years ago or something that I read an article that it's in 1953, there was a psychiatrist in Hollywood giving LSD to the movie stars.
Hmm.
We, a general public, didn't hear about it until the mid-60s. I'm not even counting the indigenous stuff. That was
Mhm.
not heard of at all. Ayahuasca really didn't start coming on board until about maybe 20 years ago. And then it swept the country,
Mhm.
like 67, 68. I went all the way to California to get some LSD because I didn't know where I was living in Houston.
Mhm.
And, you know, the thing about any of these, and it really does tuck back into spirituality and shamanism, it was a startling example of how our everyday reality is not the only reality.
Mhm.
There are many realities, and that we have an ability to tap into. So for me, it was always about consciousness and the nature of reality rather than party or escape or any of those kind of stuff. I was
Mhm.
fascinated by it. And all my education was along those lines, hypnosis and brainwave entrainment and meditation and I mean, they were all intertwined
Mhm.
with, the psychedelics.
Mhm.
And right now I'm concerned with the overselling of psychedelics.
Mhm. Mhm.
I'm really deeply concerned about that because what I'm afraid of is they'll create a backlash because it's not true.
Mhm. Well, I feel like all of these things have a dark and a light because that's the reality we live in. We live in a polarity, which is where the beauty comes from, the dark and the light. Because I feel like, you know, before the beginning of all time, or whatever, it was just all light. Like it's all God, it's all light, and then that got boring, and so God let Lucifer introduce darkness, and then we got this play between the light and the dark.
Mhm.
And that's kind of what I was saying, even with the transgender movement. There's a light side, which is authenticity and freedom of expression and acceptance and love. And there's a dark side, which is the commodification and the weaponization of selling this illusion of finding completion or wholeness by getting the surgery, taking this drug. And
Yeah.
so I think same thing with psychedelics. Like it can be extremely healing and beautiful and amazing. And there's darkness and there's entities
Mhm.
and there's shit that can, it can be weaponized.
Well, yeah, there is darkness and everything, but what I'm seeing is it's being presented as, a miracle healing.
Mhm, mhm, mhm,
And so now I've known people for like 30, 40 years who have always had access to psychedelics. And some of them are amazing, wonderful people, professional people, and some of them just, couldn't handle it and went off the deep end.
mhm,
So, the psychedelics alone wasn't the answer. And
mhm,
any literature that talks about how to do psychedelics responsibly, no matter what you're doing, is always set and setting.
mhm,
Instead, it's your intention. What are you carrying forward
mhm, mhm,
into this journey? And the setting is making sure it's safe,
mhm,
making sure that there's care so that you can fully enter those worlds.
mhm.
Because
And yeah.
I've never liked doing psychedelics out and around. To me, it's really boring in a way because you're having all these alterations of consciousness and reality, and you're still having to figure out how to get, from the restaurant to the car.
Yeah.
I don't want to waste my time using this psychedelic space to
Yeah.
figure things out.
Trying to get the rational part to function as you're in
Yeah,
this world
so
of
I
else.
mean, that's what the setting is about. You're in a setting where you can really flow and explore
Open.
and to the experience. Yeah.
And then the third part is the integration, which again is probably the most important part because without the integration, there's no change, and
Yeah,
it's it's worthless. So
you've had an experience, and
mm,
that's about as far as it goes.
yeah, yeah, and so I find a lot of a lot of us who work with medicines and who are facilitating is like, okay, like how do we educate people on the integration aspect and help people integrate these truths that they may be downloading, or these, healings that may be occurring. If you don't continue them, then you go back to the old you and nothing really changes.
Most serious psychonauts who like exploring these domains will tell you that almost every one of them has some kind of a meditation practice.
Yeah.
They have some kind of way where they settle down and they go inside and they explore.
Because I think ultimately the psychedelics are the doorway. It's like the doors and the perception, but like the psychedelics are the doorway to these other realms that are accessed through meditation, through our spiritual connection. Like it's not like you need those things to get there, but it helps to have that access until you can kind of figure out that you can get there yourself, or you have experiences where you are taken there.
I remember the book Be Here Now. That was
Yes, I can't believe you mentioned that.
that was revolutionary. I remember it had to be, I don't know when the book came out, but I must have read it somewhere around 1970.
Uh-huh.
It really, really tapped in,
71. Yeah.
yeah, it really tapped into what a lot of us was discovering, but we had no words for. I must have given away 10 of those books.
I just have to say, I'm in my friend Rob's room, and I was doing an interview yesterday with another mystic, and I looked over and I saw the book sitting on his bookshelf, and I was like, oh, I love that book, because I was exposed to this book. I think my best friend and roommate in 2010, I think he came across the book, and he's like, you have to read this book. And I read it, and it just was perfect timing and blew my mind open, because I was just starting my awakenings. It almost is a reminder of like, oh, all of this is real. Like what you're experiencing, what you're going through. Here's a map. It's happened before. You're not the first one. You're not the last one.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And I was just reading it before our call. Like I flipped it open and I was just like,
That's
yes.
interesting because no, as far as I know, it was a book that kind of cracked open the spiritual aspect of what we were doing, because we were doing it and it
Yeah.
was interesting, but we, again, like there wasn't a context for it at all.
And that was my experience with, so in my 20s, I started drinking. I went down the path of alcoholism. Like I was essentially an alcoholic, drinking every day, not getting drunk every day, but just at least a beer or glass of wine every single day, every night. And then on the weekends, I was getting trashed and blacking out. And so this was like starting in 2001 or two. And then in 2007, I met some people who were more into psychedelics, so mushrooms and MDMA, ecstasy, in the dance scene. And so then I shifted from getting blackout drunk every weekend to doing ecstasy every weekend. And not every weekend, every other weekend. And then I would go to these outdoor festivals that my friends kind of like camp out, like mini tiny Burning Mans with like 50 people. I was given mushrooms, and the first time I was given mushrooms, I don't even know how much, they just gave them to me and I just ate them. And I feel like and I was also meditating, like around this time, I'd begun a meditation practice. So I feel like the convergence of the meditation, the mushrooms, and the MDMA, it rerouted me away from alcoholism. I started just like not wanting to black out every weekend. I'm like, what's even the point if I don't remember the fun that I'm having?
Yeah.
And then I started experimenting. Okay, like, can I go for 3 days without a drink? Can I go for 2 weeks without a drink? And even when I started playing with that, my friends got upset, because people, when you're with other alcoholics and you stop drinking, they feel attacked. And they're like, well, why aren't you drinking? What's wrong with drinking? And it was fascinating to observe how people responded, because nobody wanted me to stop drinking in that crowd.
No, that's true. I
Yeah.
mean, I know that about alcoholics,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And over time, like the better that I began to feel, because I'd had these altered states with ecstasy, especially, of just feeling so good and open and fearless and just in this loving, connected state, drinking alcohol didn't feel that good anymore. I could
No,
feel, I could feel how it lowered my consciousness and it disconnected me rather than connecting me. Maybe this is what it is. Like, because I've always wondered, okay, alcohol is obviously not an entheogen, which entheogen means like bringing God
right,
within or like inciting the divine within. I think like mushrooms, LSD, MDMA, these things connect you with the divine, or can if you do them intentionally. And alcohol separates you from the divine
true. It
and
does.
your own divinity. So that's been my experience. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I agree.
yeah.
I was saved from drinking
Mm.
because my physiology is such that if I have more than 2 drinks, I will get sick.
Interesting.
There's no blacking out. There's no morning after. I'm sick.
Okay. Yeah.
So I've been saved.
Yeah.
I mean, I not through any morality because I went through some pretty tough times over my life. And if something would have taken me away, I
Hmm.
I know I would have done it, but alcohol just made me sick
Hmm.
and I
Hmm.
couldn't do it. And with marijuana, even though marijuana, when I first really had it, it made me smile, it it wasn't the thing to do when I was in hard times
Mm.
because it opened me up.
Hmm.
I was more vulnerable to all the pain and the negativity that was happening in
Mm. Interesting. Because, yeah,
my life.
I've always had very bad reactions to cannabis, like over most of my entire life. I've tried it and it makes me anxious. I have horrible drug trips. Like, I've never had a bad trip on mushrooms or LSD, but on cannabis, I've had some horrible trips at Burning Man.
Oh
But
wow.
probably because like it's not my medicine, but it also probably opens me up too much to whatever energies or to my own anxiety or things like this.
Right. And I'm the opposite. I have never, ever had a mushroom experience like they talk about.
Oh wow, interesting.
No, not we could go back to 1972, first time.
Yeah.
Everybody is having a great time, and I'm going like, this isn't any fun, and I've tried it many different times.
Not your medicine.
It's not my medicine. I had, people said, well, why do you keep doing that? I said, well, I'm stubborn.
No,
You
and
know,
I did the same thing with cannabis. I
I want
tried,
to try, I want to see, but
yeah,
no, it never worked. And
that,
thinking of, how the John Hopkins thing's giving it to people who are afraid of dying. Oh my God, I would run screaming from the room if they tried to do that to me
yeah.
because I've had such awful, awful, awful experiences with mushrooms.
That's amazing. See, I've never heard this before. I've never really heard of anybody having negative experience. I mean, at a large dose, yes, but like not at a small or a normal dose. But
No,
it's just a good reminder that not people have different medicines and not everything is everybody's medicine.
I know. And see, because it's been illegal, we can't study. I mean, that's really the sad part because it's been so
Yeah.
illegal. We can't study these interactions.
Hmm. Hmm.
That, just like any other kind of medication, some people can't take Prozac, for instance,
Hmm.
or something else. They'll have a anaphylactic shock from a
Yeah.
medicine, but we can't study it
Yeah.
because of the prohibitions. And those prohibitions don't make any sense because none of these that we're talking about are addictive. Ketamine is the one exception, and
Right.
ketamine is legal.
Yeah. Is it?
It's legal, but
Okay.
it's always been legal because ketamine is a veterinary or
Uh,
pediatric
okay.
anesthetic. So
Yeah.
it's been used by physicians in that context
Hmm.
forever.
Hmm. Hmm.
And all this touting, the ketamine therapy and whatever. I've known very solid people who had access to any kind of psychedelic that they wanted,
Hmm.
you know, and became severely addicted to ketamine.
Wow. I didn't know that. I hadn't heard that either. Because
I
I've,
know, I know they're not talking about it because
yeah.
I've been kind of, in the scene for 30, 40 years,
Yeah.
I've seen it.
Yeah.
And it really, really is worrisome
Yeah.
that,
And I've tried,
that,
like, psilocybin is my medicine. That's one of my main medicines. And I've been microdosing off and on for a few years now. And it's so non-addictive. It's hard for me to just remember to microdose. And again,
right,
like, this is like small amounts where you barely feel it. You still feel good, a little sparkle, or you don't feel it. But I don't forget to drink coffee. I don't drink it anymore. But when I drink coffee, it's not like you forget to drink coffee. You crave it. Or with alcohol, I don't forget to drink alcohol. I want a glass of wine. And with
yeah.
mushrooms, there's none of that. And I always found that so funny, of like, even something that can feel really good, it doesn't have that addictive quality at all.
And MDMA doesn't either. I mean,
Yeah.
people will take too much MDMA because they don't really understand the medicine.
Hmm.
But the thing about MDMA is if a person, say they take it every week,
Hmm.
right? You know, they
Hmm.
go out and party, take it every week. After maybe a couple of months, they're not going to get the MDMA effect. They'll get a speed effect from
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
amphetamine compound, but they won't get the heart opening, the loving, the absolute beauty.
Hmm.
That won't happen.
Hmm. Hmm.
So most people who really respect MDMA and its power for love, I will
Hmm.
say love and healing, they won't take it more than maybe every 3 months.
Hmm.
And yeah,
I would say I was doing it, and again, this was before there was no talk about the healing effects really of psychedelics, and no one in my crowd was. We weren't. None of us were consciously doing healing, though. In that group, there were people that healed severe trauma by taking MDMA and sitting and talking with their friends for 7 hours.
mhm.
And like having that feeling of love and healthy attachment, because it removes all of the fear, all of the ego blockages to feeling love and letting love in, and all that stuff. And so, yeah, I was doing small. I would never do more than like one pill. And I had friends who would do like 5 pills or whatever. And like you said, probably more for the speed. But I would do one pill every other weekend. But eventually I could feel that, like, the effect wasn't the same. And I could also feel my brain getting squishy. Like, I could feel myself getting stupider. And I was like, I don't want to fuck up my brain and be stupid. And so I stopped. And that was a choice that I made because I could feel that, it was no longer a medicine and it was starting to turn into a poison.
And MDMA is not the kind of medicine that more is better.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you're talking about your friends taking more,
Hmm.
thinking that they will get higher, they won't get.
Yeah. Yeah.
They'll get where they're edgy and can't sleep and that
Hmm.
kind of stuff, but
Hmm.
they're not going to get more blissful.
Hmm. Hmm.
It
Yeah.
doesn't work that way, no.
Yeah. Yeah.
No.
All right.
Oh
What should we talk about now? What do you feel like talking about?
gosh, I don't even know.
Or if you have a story you want to tell around shamanism, like maybe a cool, freaky story, some experience that you had.
Well, I'm always amazed at doing the very simple. I mean, the entry exercise in shamanism, and core shamanism, as Harner teaches it, as what's the woman's name? Ingram teaches,
Mm-hmm.
how easy it is once you kind of get a little guidance to enter a different domain where you learn and understand things about someone else that you would have no way in the world of knowing. Just
Mm-hmm.
not. You would
Yep.
not. And I even had an example of it this past weekend. We were in New York, in the country in New York. Our little shamanic team, we met for kind of a pre-thing, we were doing a ceremony. And the core shaman thing is very, very simple. And there are no medicines. You
Okay.
don't need medicine.
Mm-hmm.
It's a certain drum beat, which entrains the brain into theta.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's an envisioning of going into a tunnel into the lower world, the shamanic lower world. the world of, I call it the world of compassionate spirits or mother spirits,
Mm.
and connecting with your spirit guide or power animal. You've got your client with you energetically,
Mhm.
and you say this person needs something. They said this or that is happening in their life or whatever. What do I do? And then you use your energy,
Mhm.
but not your intellect, to do whatever spirit asks you to do to help this person. And it's amazing how easy it is for people. And in our very first journey with people, we do an interesting thing is, everybody in the group is being trained into going into the lower world, connecting with the power guide, asking the power guide to come back with them. So everybody does that.
Mhm.
The second phase is where people go, wow. Because the second phase is then you have them pair with someone else that they do not know in the
Mhm.
system. They pair them. And each person has a question in their mind for themselves about something they want to know. But they
Mhm.
don't tell the other person.
Yeah.
They do not. They both have the question. And then they journey together. So they touch, maybe just even a finger or a toe. They touch. They do the same thing. They go into the lower world. The drum's beating, helping them carry. The drum is the horse that carries you into the
Ah.
world. And they ask their spirit guide, so and so has a question, has a need. Show me what to do.
Mhm.
And a lot of times the imagery in doing this kind of work is unlike any other kind of imagery.
Mm.
It really is. It's not like anything you imagine. It's not
Mhm.
like anything you've seen in dreams or movies or anything.
Mm.
I can't describe it. It's just so different. So you're there and you're journeying for this other person. And I tell people, I say, you've got to be humble here.
Mhm. Mhm.
Something looks pretty crazy or wacky, and you think, oh, this can't be it. Forget that. Just
Yeah.
go along with it,
I've
whatever.
I've thought
Whatever.
about that. Yeah, when doing healing work, and I'm like, sometimes I'll do weird shit, and I'm like, if anybody was watching me, they'd think that I am insane.
Right, right. So they do that. And then when they come back and share, that's when the
Mm.
oh wow comes in, because the other person said, how, how did you know that? How do you know that happened to me? Or how did you know I was in that real, that kind of a relationship? And then that's where a person understands that they really have entered a different domain, a different place. And I did one of these just basic journeys once in Paris. A friend of mine wanted me to do it with her employees, her team.
Mhm.
Did it the very basic way, no bells and whistles, you know. And we were in a building, you not a big nature thing.
Mhm.
And this one woman came back, and she didn't even realize the enormity of what had happened, because she was visited by the mother buffalo and the white buffalo calf. She didn't have any idea of the significance of the white buffalo calf,
Wow.
and had felt this total love coming from, the buffalo and the calf.
So tell us about the white buffalo prophecy.
Well, I actually don't even understand it. I can't really do that, but
Okay.
there has been a white buffalo calf, just has been born right now,
Yes. So
right now.
I don't remember it either. I know I've seen it on social media, but I think there's a Hopi prophecy about when the white buffalo calf is born or returns. That's like the shifting of humanity where we come back to love or consciousness or something like that.
Well, I guess it happened. We're in the age of Aquarius, and there is a white buffalo calf that was just born. So what can we say? right?
Yay. You say yay.
Yeah, I want to tell you, just again about the journey stuff
Yeah.
on this. I mean, I have tons of stories, but I'll tell a really recent one when I was in New York with my shaman friends, and some of them hadn't journeyed. They were new to this, but we were pairing up, and I was paired up to the leader. His name's Barnaby, and a wild artist man. But anyway, we were going to do a soul retrieval. We're teaching people to do soul retrieval.
Mhm.
And so, the drum starts, I go in, before I even get to the ground of where I usually meet my parents, this word shows up in my mind, 11 years old.
Mm.
What? It wouldn't go away. 11 years old, 11 years old, And because this guy is the head guy, there's a part of me over here that didn't want to be embarrassed by getting it wrong.
Yes.
But I've learned to go along with it. So 11 years old, 11 years old. So I'm sitting in my circle. I have a place in that realm. And this kid runs up, about 11-year-old, skinny kid, skinny boy.
In your
And
vision.
in my vision, this is all inner vision stuff.
Yeah.
He runs up and I said, so-and-so is looking for you and would like for you to come back, meaning integrate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm.
And this kid says, I don't want to. He's a pissy little kid. I don't want to. I said, why don't you want to? Because he doesn't listen to me. Well, what if he listened to you? I don't know, because he doesn't listen to me. And so we went back and forth, back and forth. And finally the kid said, well, maybe I'll try it out, And so what you do is you ask the lost soul part if they'll come back with you.
Mm.
After some negotiation there. And so he said, okay, I'll try it out. So I blow him in. I come back and I tell Barnaby, there's an 11-year-old kid who's mad at you. He said, oh, I know, 11 years old. That's when I stayed in the closet for 3 days. And I didn't want to talk to anybody because no one would listen to me. Had no idea.
Yeah.
None.
Yeah.
And I said, well, this kid says you don't listen to him. He said, oh, I thought it was because other people didn't listen. He said, no, you don't listen to him. You talk over him when he wants to have something to say, and he wants you to listen. And he said, okay.
Wow.
But
That's
I
amazing.
mean, it's so clear. See, I mean, like,
Yes.
boom. And,
Yeah.
and I've had many, many other experiences like that.
Yeah. And I've started having those now too with the healing stuff. One example is I have a friend who lives locally here and she's a priestess, and I do kindred meditation, which is like an intuitive form of movement meditation that's done in tandem and partnership, but it's very much like doing shamanic work with yourself and opening to the energy flowing and doing weird stuff where you're like your body wants to do this and you don't know why, you just do it. So she and I started doing workshops together where she facilitates the breath work and I facilitate kindred movement. And we did a workshop a couple, like 2 months ago, and there was a woman there, and I could tell before we even started doing any work that she was on the edge of a psychotic break, like that kind of energy, that kind of like,
Fractured.
fractured non-coherence. And which I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like I've been in that space myself. And so I don't have a fear of that. And I know I know it. Like I've been in the underworld. Like I can hold that. I know it. But I just noted it. And so we went into the breath work portion, and I did part of the breath work myself, but then I was called to get up and to move around. And I was called to this woman, and my friend Lisa, who was facilitating, she was working on her already. And I was called to go down to the woman's feet and hold her feet and kind of ground her energy. And Lisa was up at her head doing energetic work. And then at some point, we were both called to switch. And again, we're not talking. Lisa's facilitating breath work. Everybody in the class is breathing. The woman that we're working on is like convulsing. and breathing, but a lot of convulsing. And I was just loving her, and like, anything you want to release, any darkness, like bring it, like let it go, let it go, let it go.
I'm not
And
afraid of it. I can handle it.
yeah,
Yeah.
I wasn't afraid. I wasn't afraid. And at one point, my mind, because now I'd started to experience entities and realize like, oh shit, entities are real, which I never believed before February. And my mind was like, she might attack you right now because the entities or whatever was going on, which like there was a fight going on in her body.
Mhm.
And so that thought came up, like she might attack you. And I was like, fine, like I'm not afraid of you. And it was probably an entity, like just like trying to get me to go into fear rather than being in love. And I was like, no. But anyways, I was called to start stroking her forehead. And I always check my intuition because I hadn't touched her at this point, but I was called to start stroking her forehead. So I started stroking her forehead, and she's, convulsing, going through her thing. I'm toning over her, just feeling that the toning, the sound would help her find coherence. And so we go through the process. We close up. She calms down, and the session ends. And then we kind of discuss. And later on, she takes me aside, and she said she had bangs, and she raises her bangs, and I noticed there's scars all over her forehead, which I hadn't felt or noticed. And she's like, I haven't let anyone touch my forehead in 20 years, because she had this skin condition like rosacea or scarring, and she'd always kept like bangs like covering her
Oh,
forehead because
right,
she had
right.
this huge complex about it. And she's like, I've had, yeah, she's just been terrified of letting anyone see or touch her forehead for 20 years. And I didn't know this. I had no fucking idea. We didn't talk about this beforehand. She didn't mention she had rosacea, like none of that. And it wasn't visible because it had just started healing a few months prior when she started doing this light therapy, and she was ready to let it go. But for me, that was again like this confirming experience, like, okay, I'm not just making shit up in my head. I'm not just being crazy. Like there is from
Mm,
reality dialogue that's happening, and this
mm,
is real. Like this stuff is real.
yeah. Well, that reminds me, my very first shaman healing that I did at Burning Man.
Huh?
Um, and I mean, really, it was my first time there. And this girl chooses me to work with. And she comes and she sits down, you know, and she says, I have a medical problem. And inside of me went, oh shit. No, I mean, I'm not up for this. I can't do it. You know, that's what I mean. But
Yeah.
not gonna turn her away,
Yeah.
And so I really try to ask as little as possible about a person,
Hmm.
because it contaminates it, because my mind
Hmm.
is involved and create a story.
Hmm.
So I did ask her a little bit about herself, and she had come to this country, I think from Lithuania. She come when I think she was 10 years old when she came over here. And anybody knows what it's like coming to a country, you don't have the language and everything. And that when she was a teenager, she developed severe psoriasis.
I have psoriasis. It's mostly gone, but yeah.
Yeah. And on the top of her head and her arms. And so she felt very ugly, and
Mm,
she did not want people close to her.
yeah.
And so she did tell me that much. And again, I have no idea. So I go in. When I say I go in, I go through the tunnel down into the lower world. And so what I was shown was that she developed the psoriasis herself without knowing, body mind kind of thing, because if people rejected her for her psoriasis, for her condition, they weren't rejecting her for herself. It was a protection.
Yeah.
So,
I'm getting a ringing in my ear right now.
okay.
It's
Right. And so that's what spirit told me. And so I did a combination of some energy work. I did a little bit of probably of soul retrieval. I'm not quite sure everything I did. And she was responding because sometimes she smiled, sometimes she cried, sometimes she'll joke. But when it was over, and I told her a little bit about it, she said, I really didn't feel that much. I mean, I could see she was feeling a lot, but so I told her, because maybe I didn't do soul retrieval. Maybe I didn't do that because I told her we were doing a soul retrieval workshop that night,
Mm-hmm.
and it would be really good if she came.
Mm-hmm.
And so that night she did come, but I was a drummer, so I couldn't, work with her.
Mm-hmm.
One of our other shamanistas worked with her, and she cried. Finally, I was done with drumming, and I told the people, I said, she's my baby, I'm going to take her. She cried for an hour, just sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. And I said, you know what the tears are, don't you? You know why you're crying. And she said, yes. We didn't even talk about it. We knew because the tears were washing this stuff away,
Mm.
washing it away.
Mm.
And so
And psoriasis is absolutely, like, scientifically, it's caused by stress. It's caused by chemicals in your body,
yeah,
which are, created by our thoughts and our stories and our trauma and our beliefs. So releasing those chemicals,
right.
literally
Yeah,
through the tears.
did. And so she came back the next year and came over.
And what year is this? You said this is like 16 years ago. This is your first.
It was like 2005 or somewhere around in there. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Her whole life had changed.
Yeah.
But she had gotten out of an abusive relationship. She had moved to a new city. She'd gotten a new job, and she had no psoriasis.
Wow. And that's the beauty, is going from darkness to light. Like, if somebody comes and they're like, yeah, I'm fine, I have a great life, I have a husband and I have plenty of money and I'm working a job that's good, and then you help them sleep better at night. I mean, that's not as beautiful as, like, somebody who goes from these depths of, like, suffering or sadness or pain or ugliness or grief or whatever it is, to that, like, that opposite expansiveness is so beautiful and powerful. And it's just, for me, it's that reminder of, like, yeah, no, we don't want anyone to suffer, we don't want the ugliness, but that's where the beauty comes from, and that's the price of beauty, is that we go through the darkness and then come
Well,
back to the light.
sometime when we're challenged, that brings out, maybe it doesn't bring out the solution, but it brings out the will to find the solution,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And I did a meditation one time, just, because that's what I do, about this very thing, about destruction and darkness and
Mm-hmm.
and so I asked the question, why the violence, why the destruction and everything. And what I was shown was a volcano erupting, and the fire and the lava and all of that. And then I saw an island being born.
Mm.
And so, along with the images comes a knowing.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I understand. I get
Mm-hmm.
it. So that was one of the lessons, I guess.
Yay, I love it.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's wrap up our conversation for today. It's been
All right.
amazing. And I
Yeah.
would love to just do more of these, because I know you have so many stories.
All right.
And
I'll do
yeah,
it. I'll do it. And let me see let me see what you've put together after this. I can't wait.
yes. No, absolutely. Yeah, I'll do just a little bit of editing, but not much. And then, just as, like, kind of, since we didn't really do an introduction, we just jumped into it. Do you want to give like a little, like, What's your name? What's your social media? What work do you currently do in the world?
Oh my God, I can't do that because I go by Khats in all of these circles.
Okay.
As of yet, I do not have a website
Okay.
for
What about
this.
social media? Are you on Instagram?
I am, but I've never put a thing on there.
Okay.
I'm a newbie.
You're a newbie.
However, I do have an internet address,
Yes.
and that is Travel Khats, and it's spelled travel, KHATS, @gmail.com.
Okay. So people want to
So
get in touch. And you do work in the psychotherapy and the medicine
I'm
shamanic.
I am retiring from being a psychotherapist because I'm really being pulled into the shamanic and the magic world. I mean, it's there. It says, okay, it's time to do this kind of work more. And so I'm shutting down that part because in our culture, they don't integrate.
Yeah.
So I'm shutting this one down and opening this other one up. So that's how people can find me until I get something more going as it presents itself.
Okay. Beautiful. Perfect. And yeah, we'll have more of these conversations because there's a lot more stories. And I feel that us telling our stories and our personal experience just grounds this reality of the spiritual world, of the mystical magical world, of the power of these healing modalities that are not logical, or rational. They're real, and we need to talk about them, and we need to tell the stories because they're
Well,
experiential.
and I think we're just ordinary people.
Yeah.
We're not way up there.
Yeah.
We're being honest.
Yeah. Yeah, I've struggled my
Well,
whole life.
I just
And I was into all this stuff, but I was a doubter. I was a skeptic. Even though I was into it, I still had this part of me that was totally skeptical until February when I had that breaking open. And I was like, oh, no, this is real. Like it's time to fully step into it. And also for me, I'm moving away. Like I've done a ton of different jobs. I've worked in commercial real estate. I've worked in the tech world, startups. I've worked with governments. I've worked, and I can no longer do anything that's not this. That's not fully in the mystical, magical, spiritual, creative, helping people remember their spiritual, magical, divine, creative selves, and helping them and myself ground that into this reality to start to have that integration between these worlds that have been split, the world of the material, rational, logical, which our society currently exists in, and the world of the mystical, magical, spiritual. And like we gotta integrate them.
Well, it's happening. I mean, if you
Yeah.
go, if you go on YouTube or Facebook with all the different groups,
Hmm.
it's amazing.
Hmm.
And it's only with the internet that it's been available for everyone, no matter where they are in the world.
Hmm.
So maybe this is because the white cat has been born. We don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
All right, we'll talk again. I loved it.
Thank you for sharing.
Okay, see you
Bye.
later. Bye-bye.